Okay, I want to thank everybody and welcome you to today's live webinar entitled Demystifying Change Management. Today's session features a great public speaker with a lot of expertise in FDA requirements, and we'll introduce him in just a moment. Before we do, I want to take a moment and introduce Xybion Corporation. Xybion is bringing this event to you today, so you'll have to obviously sit through a few moments of us telling you about who we are. We are a technology organization, a global technology company, founded originally in 1977. A privately held organization that is very much focused around a set of products and services geared towards companies operating in highly regulated environments, particularly within life science. Products that exist in Xybion's mix include total regulated lab execution systems, evidence-based healthcare, asset and content management, total compliance solutions, software testing and validation, as well as validation in a platform as a service mode. There are global offices for Xybion, including New Jersey and Pennsylvania, as well as Quebec, Canada, Germany, and a global center of excellence in India. The value proposition of Xybion is and always has been the ability to lower the total cost of ownership of your technology investments related to compliance, quality management, lab management, etc. We deliver enterprise products, services, and solutions that are designed to help power innovation as well as efficiency in your organizations. A brief history of Xybion today. The company exists as a result of a successful initial execution of strategic vision of creating global solutions company with specialized software and services through strategic acquisitions as well as organic growth. Without going through all the bullet points of the timeline, because you will have this, originally Xybion was founded as a preclinical software solution in 1977 and added additional products throughout its life cycle, including quality management, as well as the Pristima and Amadeus product lines, as well as the Stellex and VitalPath products and services from GE Healthcare. In 2011, we created Xybion India, which was a global development center of excellence. With that, we're going to change presenter to Mr. Joe Franchetti, and I'm going to take a moment to transfer this over to Joe and let Joe tell you a little bit about his background and his organization. Go ahead, Joe, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you very much, Kevin. Well, welcome, everyone. I hope you are going to sit back and relax and enjoy the show for the next 45, 50 minutes. As Kevin had mentioned, please do ask questions along the way with the question panel within your meeting session. So today's session, certainly we're going to talk about change management and try to demystify, the illusion of change management and the problems that it possesses. So before we start, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Obviously, a picture up there of me. I'm managing consultant of JAF Consulting. I have over 25 years of experience in organizational process management, information technology, and quality assurance in the regulated industries. Been consulting over 20 years, and in that time I've been involved with, systems implementation from manufacturing, drug development, post-manufacturing, all along the drug development and drug pipeline, and certainly have touched on a lot of the different organizational processes within each of those areas. I'm also the training chairperson for the Society of Quality Assurance, the Computer Validation Initiative Committee. They will focus on current computer validation topics that we're focused on in today, and we'll be, we have multiple training events, symposiums, and so forth. The company itself, JAF Consulting, we've been in business for about 15 years, not quite as long as Xybion, but we have a core expertise with the implementation of computerized systems in regulated environments. Our teams, understand and are very practical at implementing systems and very cost-effective approaches, certainly meeting today's business requirements as well as the regulatory requirements. So, we have a full line of services around computer system validation, quality management system training, and education, along with auditing and assessments of most organizations. So that's enough about me. Let's step into this session. So today we're going to look at a couple of things around, the controls around maintaining that validated state, to maintain these systems. And then as we may know, the number one cause of systems being out of compliance or out of the validated state is change management. I'm going to talk about a couple of those controls, though. I'm going to look at a few definitions, very, very small number of definitions. We're going to look at the change and change management process and see where those two are different. And then we're going to look at risks and then tie it all together. So, maintain the validated state. There are a number of controls that must be in place as the system's implemented in any environment, not just a regulated one. In addition to the validation procedures, there are procedures on use and operation, training, security, administration, backup and recovery. You have disaster recovery and business continuity. Also, there's configuration and change management. And change management is our topic for today. Okay, so first I want to just, as a very general overview, to make sure that we're all on the same page, I want to talk to you a little bit about what a computer system is and when we talk about validation, what it truly entails. So in most cases, there are hardware and software that are associated with the system. And then there's the vendors and software developers that are tied in there. So you have all of your desktops, your servers, your network, your applications, your databases, and all the vendors that are associated with that. Then you have the architecture. And the architecture deals with how each of these components, databases, software, hardware, all interact with each other. Then you start tossing into some of the other components of this, such as other equipment that may be tied in there, your operations and operational activities, all of your procedures on how to manage and utilize the system, and last but not least, your people and your users who are participating in the execution of these systems. That's a very important part. So when we talk about the validation scope, we look at that entire combination of components. Now there's the operational environment that's not necessarily going to be able to control depending on how big the system is. And also you have infrastructure that's a part of this that it's mostly treated separately, but if it's dedicated to the individual system, it will be included in that scope. It'll be inside that dotted red line. It could be its own scope and outside of that line if it supports many validated systems along the way. So I just want to make sure we're all pretty straightforward with that definition and what a computer system. So change is, at its most basic level, change is a movement out of the current state, which is how things are today, through a transition state and into a future state, which will be how things are done in the future. Changes happen all around us at home, in our community, and at work. Changes can be internally motivated or externally motivated. The change can be a dramatic departure from what we know, or it can be minor. Changes can be anticipated or unexpected. In all these cases, the fundamental nature of change is a movement from the current state through a transition state into that future state. So we have to truly understand that when we start looking at change. While project management and change management involve different activities and can be managed separately, for the best outcomes, two processes must be integrated to create a unified transition plan. Project management provides the essential structure through which change management can occur. So when you look at the change management, the project management, it is the technical side, is how those systems are implemented. And then when you look at the change management, it's the people side. And it's the solution certainly is independent of this, but it's about supporting the individual employees impacted by the change through their own transitions, from their own current state to their own future state that's been created by the project or initiative. It's very, very important to understand that it's only when these employees embrace and adopt the use of change that the overall results and the effects of the technical project are truly achieved. So a little bit on change management. Change management is a systematic approach to dealing with change, both from the perspective of an organization and on the individual level, or bringing the personal level in. And although it's somewhat of an ambiguous term, change management has at least 3 different aspects. And we're looking at adapting to the change, controlling it, and affecting it. Change and change management on the surface, they may seem somewhat interchangeable. However, there are significant and important differences between change and change management. When there's no clear delineation, the result of confusion and lack of clarity on what is needed to move the initiative forward. The better we can separately define and address change and change management, the better position we will be in as change practitioners with a clearer scope and a shared sense of direction and purpose. So we take an organizational perspective when talking about change. So looking at these 5 different events, we're moving from a documented and managed process to an ad hoc process, moving to an integrated system from numerous legacy systems, merging from 2 organizations, introducing new equipment into a manufacturing process, and we're moving from paper and pencil to an electronic health record, trying to take a pretty broad brush stroke at these different topics. So each of these examples have a clear current state and a clear future state. A project or initiative in the organization is undertaken to give a structure to the effort of designing the future state and developing a solution for the transition state. And changes are implemented for a reason, to reach the future state where performance is better than the current state. That's what we hope. Changes can be driven by issues in the current state or motivated by opportunities in the future state, such as technology and other process improvements. But the change is undertaken to improve their performance in a meaningful way. However, every organizational change is ultimately has many individual impacts to the tens, hundreds, or thousands of employees who have to do their jobs differently when they adopt this solution. This is a role of change management. Change management is necessary because organizational change, moving from an organizational current state to an organizational future state, ultimately impacts how people do their jobs. While changing is about moving to the future state, change management is about supporting the individual employees impacted by the change through their own transitions from their own current state to their own future state that has been created by the project initiatives. So for every one of those different changes that we have up on the screen, there are many different solutions. The newly documented and managed process will be executed by someone. Integration, of the numerous legacy systems will be used by people. Many people, when you merge organizations, will have to manage their jobs differently and execute their jobs differently. Bringing new equipment to a manufacturing process affect people, and also electronic systems will certainly be impacted by those that have to use those and use those effectively. So as we look at over the life of a project, as we look at the cost of changes over the project timeline, certainly cost of changes increase as the project draws to the close. Right, as we implement a project or implement a new initiative, that project certainly costs will go up. But where you have the top line of the stakeholder influence and risk of uncertainty, it's very high. There's a high level of anxiety at the beginning of that project until individuals and the organizations understand how that change will affect their organization. And at the close of that project, that anxiety slowly dissipates and drops off as we move toward the end of that project timeline. This is a great saying about change. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. And at the end of the day, this is what we have to, how we have to embrace change. You can't be afraid of change in that regard. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about the change management process. So this process includes steps that will ensure changes are formally described, adequately reviewed, and assessed and coordinated in line with other changes within the ongoing business activities. So first, we understand, requesting a change. Even at the simplest change, there are risks. So we would want to look at what the potential risks are within a particular change, and that's working with all the different change stakeholders within the organization. Even getting to, a lot of us may have been through the Windows 7 upgrade, where it may seem very simple and seamless. A lot more risks out there other than the technology risks that we would truly understand. When we look at the approval and deny phase of whether or not that risk or whether or not that change should be carried forward, looking at the implementation phase, and here's where we start getting into that validation activity, where we start pulling together different user requirements. We pull together our plans, our testing, and so forth. So it's very, very important to then go through and develop that documentation. And here we're going to also make changes to any documentation, any procedures, any processes that the organizations would certainly step into. And then next you have your review and reporting of that change, and finally the closeout and completion of that change. At the end of the day, the change management process certainly supports business adaptation of a particular change within an organization, technology, process, etc. So how, may you ask? So this process, this change management process, offers a standardized methodology that evaluates the potential positive and negative aspects of change, and it allows for prompt handling of these. As we step into the impact and risk analysis, we really have we have all the players at the table to make the decision on how that positive or negative aspects affect the overall business. It also ensures that changes are recorded, evaluated, planned, and accounted for, such that the organization has an ongoing living history of change-related activities. And again, as I mentioned in the very first slide of this session, is that changes to electronic systems, validated processes are the #1 reason for any system coming up with any 483 or any inspection issue, or bringing a system out of validation and potentially impacting other components within your organizational technology area. And with that, this process will hopefully minimize the disruptions that are associated with these changes at all levels. So if you're changing databases or updating databases, and next thing you know, you start breaking database links between all of your validated applications and wondering why data is not being written when you believe that it is very, very challenging. So that's what this process, and implementing one of these processes certainly is that first step in managing these change activities. And also, as you're going through this process, not only looking at the project management activities around the technical components, you're also looking at the change management components, the people side, to ensure that individuals are trained appropriately, that the way that the individuals are executing their job are duly represented in the change or process that's being changed. So it's very, very important to have this process in place. So as we talk, change management, it minimizes risk. So as we, from PMBOK, which is the project management methodology, from PMI, risk is an uncertain event or a condition, if it occurs, has an effect on at least one project objective. So there are a lot of, in any project or any change within an organization, there are many risks that could affect at least one. In some cases, will affect 2, 3, maybe 10 different project objectives in trying to get that system implemented. And then we start looking at how risk avails itself. And there's 5 different ways that risk does avail itself. And it's the risk of unauthorized and properly assessed changes. Certainly that happens occasionally. The risk of unplanned outages. Risk of low change success rate. And one thing I did not do in this presentation, I can show a lot of different statistics around how changes that are not put through this process are certainly not as successful as changes that have been. Don't get me wrong, there are the other situations where even fully thought out and thoroughly thought out changes are not successful, but the risk is somewhat lower in those particular instances. The 4th one is the risk of high numbers of emergency changes. So if you give consideration, the potential for high emergency change activity would certainly be diminished. And then the risk of significant project delays, which equate to budget and financial and overall success of a project is typically gauged by the delays that a project encounters. So in looking at these 5 risks, there are ways to mitigate those. And we're going to look at 7 different questions and asking any one of these 7 questions of who raised the change, what's the reason for the change, when is the return required from the change, if it's a financial risk. What are the risks involved in the change? What resources are required? Who's responsible? What's the relationship to this and other changes within the organization? So if we take this slide and we ask these 7 questions, we will mitigate these 5 risks most certainly for any particular organizational change. Very, very important. And also, when we know who raised that change, by following these standardized processes, these questions, is part of that process, part of that workflow that one would implement. So, certainly something that works out for the better. So what we're going to do, sort of tie this all together, and this certainly isn't, it's not a long session. I don't design my sessions to be extremely long, partly because I like the question and answer portion. Hopefully the slides bring in some concern from the attendees, and at the end of the day, certainly we can respond to those questions. So, how does it apply to me? So we're going to look at a number of different implementations here and try to see how where focusing on the project management and change management activities certainly can help. So software updates to a particular application, if it's a minor or a bug fix to that particular change. So when you start looking at these, looking at the technical side, the technical side is fairly simple as to whether or not that change truly applies, and we're going to, stepping through that process is to identify what that change is, how it affects the organizational process, whether it was a process within the laboratory, manufacturing process, clinical trials, and from a risk perspective, technically it's probably a very limited technical risk, although there could be some levels of regression testing that may need to be accomplished or may need to be viewed as the implementation process has happened. One thing that you could look at with bugs as well, when you start fixing problems within a system, how did that bug affect the previous data? And that's something that has to be recognized and has to be addressed as part of a change management process. You want to be assured that that data that you currently executed under the current system that has bugs in it certainly was not compromised at the end of the day. The next is a major enhancement. There are a lot of different applications that are moving to different types of platforms, software as a service being one of them. Major enhancements moving, total graphic user interface changed, database platforms changed. From a technical perspective, this is obviously a little bit more of a challenge or higher risks associated, because you may be building new software, you may be buying new hardware, you may be creating new databases and database structures. So from a technical perspective, you have a lot of challenges. But from a personal perspective, a user perspective, the people perspective, the adapting to that new system, you also have a very high risk of implementing this new application, this new enhancement, this major enhancement to the within the organization, primarily because it could change the way the individuals do their daily job, and that's very, very important. Back a number of years ago, I started out in industry as a biochemist in a quality control laboratory, and in that quality control laboratory, I was a champion of automated systems. I brought in robotic systems to execute the analyses of the testing. And all of the current folks that were doing that particular testing were very concerned that I was going to take their job away, that their job wasn't needed anymore. When in fact, as we started implementing these automated systems, their jobs became different. They changed their jobs, and they were able to adapt to that change much easier because they were comfort and they understood what the change in that process would be. And at the end of the day, it actually increased the number of analysts in the laboratory. So, as you step into these challenges with understanding the changes within an organization, it's extremely important to ease the anxiety of the individuals who are part of that scope, and make sure that they understand what the changes are, because if they don't accept those changes, at the end of the day, the system's not going to be successful because they're not going to use it, or they're not going to use it correctly. You look at operating system updates, fairly simple when you start making changes. There's a lot of technical issues in these types of updates and changes, not necessarily as many people issues when we do these types of updates. These could be with security patches and overall operating system health. Same with database system health. So from a technical perspective, operating system updates shouldn't pose many personnel issues, but it's certainly something to keep on the burner to think about. Infrastructure updates, certainly this could impact a lot of people, especially with today's BYOD, bring your own device environment, and the different BYOD policies within the different corporate infrastructures are really, really different depending upon the type of company that you're in. But part of this infrastructure update includes wireless and wireless activity, which could affect overall performance of applications. But again, it could also, when you look at the BYOD within your organization, bringing your own particular cell phone, for instance, into an organization so you can get email, it limits you on your personal side of restricting you certain capabilities with your device. So again, it may not, that change of bringing your own device and thinking that that's going to be productive for you can in turn not be as productive as you would hope. And then, one of the last ones we have here is configuration of roles and adding and removing of users. And this is, although it's not all that much of a technical challenge to do this, it does become a procedural challenge and a very important training component to have the individuals of new users that are being added, have them understand what their roles are within a particular system, within a particular process, and that they, what they can and what they cannot do. If they don't know what they cannot do, a lot of times they become very frustrated. So, all these changes, are very important, but in the end of the day, changes do happen, right? So we have to deal with it. And, as we get through this process, communication is key to all of the stakeholders involved in this process, and from the business process owners to our technology champions, to our quality and regulatory champions, to our overall stakeholders of these changes. Extremely important for communication. Certainly, a process for change management is going to help in this case to help reduce the anxiety. And I certainly encourage everyone as they do write or even review and modify their current processes that are out there. What you want to do is ensure that people component is in there. Make sure that the individuals who are participating in the change and are affected by the change are certainly involved in that part of the procedure. And last but not least, follow these procedures. As a lot of organizations run into those emergency changes, as I spoke of before, that certainly is a risk, and changes do happen, and problems do occur. Power does go out, and hard drives do fail, and technology does fail in certain cases. But you should have the procedures to manage those particular activities. So with that, contact your quality group or contact us for a comprehensive solution to help you maintain those validated status of your computerized systems. So with that, I leave you with a nice quote from Socrates. The secret of a change is to focus all of your energy not on finding the old, but building upon the new. And we're going to have a lot of naysayers out there when we do implement a change. And no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. And what we have to do is start focusing on well, how can we improve? How can we be lean in our direction? And I leave you with that, and I do open the floor and or screen for any questions that are out there.
Joe, thank you very much. I'm just going to go ahead and we'll bring this back here a sec, and we'll give folks obviously the best ways to get in touch with you and the best ways to get in touch with Xybion as well. So real quick, if you have questions that you haven't asked yet and you'd like to, by all means, you can start putting those through. I see we have some great ones I've been reading as they've been coming in, so we'll get to these in just a moment. In terms of getting in touch, so to recap, the relationship that Xybion has with with Joe's consulting firm. So Xybion is predominantly technology oriented. So we make software that's used by organizations large and small, local and global, to help manage change and manage regulatory processes. There's a couple of core products within our suite. The EQCM product, which is the electronic quality management system, a very popular quality management platform, coupled with there's a compliance builder, real-time compliance monitoring solution. There's also our complete suite of lab-related and preclinical software applications, as well as data information migration and management solutions. So there's a very broad suite of technology that Xybion offers its clients globally that they can use to, again, allow them to focus on building and making the products and services that you do, and letting us worry about having the right technology in place for you to manage these very complex processes. We have very valuable partners like JF Consulting, and folks like Joe's company are able to come in and really add a layer of expertise on top of the technology. We all know the technology is what it is. It's oftentimes useless without the right people operating it, the right people setting it up, the right people getting the right processes in place. So folks like Joe's organization are wonderful at doing that. So I encourage you to go out and check out JAF Consulting. I encourage you to go out and have a look at Xybion Corporation and some of the great products that we put out there. So with that, we'll come back around here and look at some questions. Firstly, we are going to go ahead and end the recording at this point.